First of all, I am delighted to be participating today. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend in person this year, as are many of us, but it's been a great opportunity to be able to share the knowledge and spend the time with a lot of people in the Microsoft community. I've found the Microsoft community to be amazing when it comes to learning new technology. And as part of my ways of giving back, I do like to talk about my journey in IT, as well as talk about the new technologies that I'm learning. Because I think that there's a lot of us out there that don't know what we don't know. And I think that, having these sessions really helps to kind of give us that nudge sometimes to get out of our comfort zone and learn something new. So today I would like to share about my personal journey of getting from on-premise DBAs to the cloud in Azure, as well as some of the shortcuts that I've been able to take along the way that has really impacted my career, and I have seen has also greatly impacted the career of others that I work with. So to talk a little bit about today's agenda, so I would like to let you know that this is absolutely a 100 level session. If you have already taken certifications and have already sat through sessions going over, like there's very specific training sessions on different certification paths, and then this session may not have as much value to you, though I do have a lot of added value in this session as far as shortcuts. And I like to spend very concentrated amounts of time learning new things and earning certifications fairly quickly. So I'll be sprinkling those tidbits along the way, as well as how best to leverage your time and leverage your branding and have those communications internally. So some of those topics might be a little more helpful to you, but if you've already sat through a certification training, then we are going to be going through some of the very introductory concepts, such as learning paths and how to go over the certification syllabi on the Microsoft website. So just to let you know that there is that material in this session. I'd like to start off with why certify. I want to talk a little bit about data science teams, how they're organized and how their responsibilities map to our more traditional data engineering, data warehousing, EDW teams. I have a couple of slides on Azure training resources. We'll go over the role-based certifications. This section will be a lot around the Microsoft documentation. And then I will have discussion at the end as far as what I have seen in the field and different ways that we can shortcut and advertise our skills to make ourselves more aligned with what the business is asking for. So let's get started with why certify. And I did delay my introductory slide because certifications have been such a tool for me to get to where I am today that it's like I cannot express to you the appreciation that I have had as a traditional on-prem DBA to what doors have been opened to me because of my ability to focus and complete my certifications. So today I'm a Microsoft AI MVP. I organized the Global AI Bootcamp Houston Edition, as well as the Global Azure Bootcamp Houston Edition. I'm based in Houston, obviously. I'm in and out of the Microsoft MTC, the Technology Center here, and I get to speak pretty much around the world on AI technologies. I speak at many of the SQL Saturdays. I spoke at past Summit last year, and I also do a lot of volunteering work. And so organizations like Black Girls Code, Women in Technology, and what I've learned spending my time here is that, especially with topics like AI and Azure, many of us have these tools, and we're able to be proactive and contribute at a very, very, high level on these newer Azure and AI tools. But a lot of the things that kind of slow us down or make us think that we won't be able to perform are, not being aware of what we don't know, So I definitely like to have these sessions so that I can shed some light on expectations and alignment, and really, get things hyped up and excited about AI and Azure. So let's look at certifications. So I went on kind of a certification binge last year, and I have maybe about 10 cloud certifications under my belt. So I have certifications on both Azure and AWS. I'm also a Databricks certified partner, and I have quite a few architect certifications from Accenture and Avanade. And my background is I just stepped out of a managing consulting role with Avanade. So as you can see, there's quite a mix there. And what did these certifications do for me? So with everything changing always in the cloud, I think the greatest thing that impacted my ability to complete certifications in the past was that I just studied too long. So one of the first certifications that I studied for was one of the old SQL Server certifications. And I think I gave myself 6 months to study, and then I studied for 6 months, and then I finally went in for the exam. And there was just so many things on the exam that I hadn't studied for that it was very discouraging for me to go back in and face that failure of having failed another exam. So I ended up not going back in and not completing that exam. And, fast forward, 5-7 years later, Azure came up, and, I really was thinking to myself, well, what is going to be the best way for me to get up to speed with all of these Azure technologies? And I really felt like I didn't want to go back to school. I have my master's degrees already. I actually have two. So I have a master's in computer science, have a master's in MBA. And I wanted to learn all these new things, but it's, I'm working full time. I don't want to go back to school. What's the quickest way for me to be proficient in these topics? And, knowing that I can't get a job doing all of these different things, but I want to be able to have intelligent conversations and contribute to teams who are performing this work. And certifications has really been that way for me to focus my study, and not only focus my study, but also receive tangible proof that I am minimally aware of certain technologies, and I also understand key concepts. So I definitely am a very strong advocate for certifications. Even if you don't sit for the exam and pass the exam, I think if you study along a certification track, there's just so much information available about that track that you will touch on all the key concepts that you need to touch on to have those conversations and understand those key concepts. And if you're studying for an exam and you're trying to interview for a position that that exam would be helpful for, I'd strongly recommend you put on your resume that you are studying for that exam, because it will be a conversation starter. So I actually have a friend who was, and I had met her at one of the women in tech groups that I speak at, and she had been operations clerk and was doing business analysis for many, many years. And she was able to upskill from her clerical position to a job as an analyst on a Forex team, because she put on her resume that she was studying for the Power BI exam and listed out the different books that she was also reviewing to prepare for that exam. So don't keep this information to yourself if you're going down these paths, and make sure that people are aware that you are putting the time and effort and that you're interested. So people around my work know that I'm interested in different things. And I always tell people, this is the exam that I'm studying for, and these are the types of projects that I'm interested in. And if you put that out there, it's way more likely that people are going to respond and think to include you in those types of projects, versus if you're just thinking it and you're telling yourself, but you're not telling the world. You really need to tell the world what you want, so that the world can help you to get onto these projects. So I certify, update my LinkedIn profile, and I've seen people in the workplace, they'll actually update their signature lines sometimes to say that they've achieved these certifications, and that lets people who they work with know that they're interested in certain capabilities. So that's a little bit about leveraging certifications. And a little bit more about my journey and thinking about, this old school EDW reporting analytics team versus this newer Azure data sciencey team. And so really, when I first started thinking about Azure, my immediate thought was, okay, I'm in data and analytics and I want to move to Azure. That means I have to be a data scientist. And that was my immediate thought process. And so I thought to myself, well, how do I get there? And one of the things that I was kind of missing in that conversation was, what makes up a data science team? And so initially, I was focused on only applying for data scientist jobs. And I was looking at, okay, well, what software are they using? What tools are they using? What programming languages are they using? Because as a data engineer, I know SQL. I went to school for a computer science degree. So I'm going to know either C++ or C# or Java. And I'm looking at mapping all of these skill sets to the skill sets that I'm seeing in these job postings. But what I didn't really understand at the time, and again, this is a 100 session. So this is for people who are currently doing bits of on-prem data work, and they're looking at kind of translating those skills to Azure. So this is kind of a conversation that I would have with my previous self, right? So Alicia, if you could go back and talk to yourself and tell yourself a little bit about your job journey from, on-prem data engineer to Azure engineer, then what would it look like? And I think I'd have a conversation with myself about this team structure, and I would call out that even though data scientist jobs are pretty high, right? That's kind of the optimal role. I think I've seen multiple articles about how the number one most fulfilling job title at one point was data scientist, right? But there's also this role for data engineer. And on top of that, we still need people to work hand in hand with the business for visualization. And these are our Power BI developers usually. And then there's this emerging role here for the DevOps engineer. So the team is actually a lot bigger than just a unicorn data scientist. And this team looks a lot more familiar to what I'm used to, right? So we're used to working on programming projects where there's SDLC, we have programmers who check in code, there's a code repository, and we've been doing visualization in many, many tools, right? So Power BI has been there a while. I've actually used Report Builder. So that was SQL Server 2005. And, you know, people use different software. So there's ClickView out there and Tableau. So these are all skills that we're probably using on premises that we can bring with us to these data science teams and immediately provide value. So my first recommendation is look at the skills that you have and map them to the new data science team and have that be your foundation and start your discussion that way. And so see how you can contribute and then look at your missing skill sets and then move forward from there. But I wouldn't discount your ability to jump directly from on-prem to Azure because you've never been on a data science team. It's as a data engineer, we all have the skills, we have the fundamental skills and thought processes to be very, very capable in the cloud. So how do we upskill? We look at tools, we look at vocabulary, and we look at processes. And definitely, as a job seeker tip, we want to look at our resume alignment. So we want to take the vocabulary and the processes in the job postings for these data science-y types of positions, and we want to either align or map our existing skills so that they reflect that we can translate those skills to the new position. So again, it's I don't think that as a data engineer we need to look at fitting ourselves into that data scientist role. I think 80% of projects involve some type of ingestion when you're working on cloud projects. So I think we definitely have very, very good skills by advertising ourselves as data engineers and working our ways up to those solution architect roles. So let's look at some Azure training resources. So there's a lot of training resources available online. I actually started, macro skeptically, where it was, what is the cloud? And that's how I had to get started. And I actually started on some of the higher level big data overview certifications. And then once I kind of understood how everything fit together, I got more and more in depth into the detailed types of topics. So you can learn different ways as far as what topics you get started with. But when it comes to the cloud, you'll figure out that a lot of it is focused around networking. So as a DBA, I have not used or needed to use a lot of my networking training. And once you start looking at the cloud and you look at, so much of it is infrastructure based. When you're looking at load balancing, when you're looking at high availability and redundancy between different regions, if you are a DBA and you have, like I had networking administrators, I had security administrators. So it really wasn't something that I had to spend a lot of time thinking about, the networking side of things. But yes, if you're going to be working in the cloud, and especially if you're working with any type of data, you're going to need to refamiliarize yourself with a lot of those concepts. Setting up load balancers, opening up ports, pinging between different boxes because connectivity is really going to be probably one of your biggest challenges when you're building in the cloud. So when I first started, I actually started on AWS, and then I moved on to Azure. And helpful hint, the AWS certs are I found a little easier to get through as far as their bar for passing the exam. So if you want to get a easy introduction into cloud concepts, I strongly would suggest the AWS Solution Architect. They have an associate certification that's pretty easy to get through. Microsoft has 900, which is the Azure Fundamentals, and that's probably going to be the most equivalent in the Azure space. And if you do anything, even if you don't decide to work in the cloud, I would recommend doing the AZ 900, just so that you can sit in on these concepts and contribute on these conversations with people at your work, and kind of be able to point out the pros and cons to hybrid architectures versus only on-prem or only in the cloud. Because I do see that a lot of us are going to be minimally moving to hybrid cloud architectures. And I think that this is going to definitely impact your work moving forward. So this is a community event. So as you know, there are multiple community events. You can participate in any of the boot camps that Microsoft hosts. You can go to Microsoft events. Past Summit has been awesome for me to participate in. And then there's Microsoft MVP blogs. So I usually follow a couple of MVPs who speak on the topics that interest me, and that keeps me up to date and aligned with what is the latest and greatest in a certain technology. So let's talk a little bit about the role-based certifications. So Microsoft has taken this approach to kind of grouping their certifications so that they align with the type of job that you're looking at. So we had talked a little bit earlier about the composition of the data science team. And this is kind of how the certifications are aligned, is what type of certifications are going to help with your role. So we have quite a few associate certifications. The Azure Fundamentals is that 900 course that I think anybody who works in IT would benefit from taking. New this year is the AI Fundamentals, which focuses more specifically on the AI suite in Azure. And then we have our associate courses. So we have data engineer, AI engineer, data scientist, and then our experts. For the data and AI track, I would recommend the Azure Solution Architect. And new this year is also the Azure Edge Engineer. So if you look at these role types and the new types of roles, AI is becoming more of a defined role as within the data space. And we'll talk a little bit about this later, and we'll talk about how this role sits on the new data science team. But for myself, I definitely looked macroscopically and then dialed back in. So I actually worked my way all the way up to solution architect, and then came back down and learned the more AI specific topics. And really, it was my engineering background and my data background was enough for me to function. I just needed to map those skills to the new tools, so the Azure tools, and then show that I was able to have those conversations. And then I went down to the nitty gritty. And it's, if you try to do everything at once, I think it can be overwhelming. And I don't really think you need to know everything and know every tool, because Azure is always changing. And my strongest suggestion is to just get started. So looking at the Azure and Data and AI certifications, we have these fundamental certifications here that are optional. They don't directly contribute to your certification path. And you can go ahead and do a fundamentals and then jump into, you will earn an associate certificate once you've passed one of these. And then there's additional certifications to get up to the Azure Solutions Architect Expert level. So if you're just getting started, I would suggest you thinking about your track. So I actually worked through my MCSE first. So I did MCSE SQL Server 2016. That was 2 certificates. I earned my MCSA and my Microsoft Certified Professional certification. And then once you pass the architect certifications for Azure, you get the Azure Solutions Architect Expert. And so I would identify one track that maps to your career goal. And then after earning that expert certificate, I would go ahead and go back and then start taking those one-offs. But it's very impressive to get to this Solution Architect Expert certificate. And it really takes you through that full life cycle of knowing concepts to being able to build solutions in the cloud. And if you become known as one of those people who are able to build solutions in the cloud or talk to people on-prem and help them with their journeys to the cloud, then that gives you a lot of time to catch up on the details and the software changes for some of the more detailed tracks. So as far as strategy for positioning yourself and prioritizing your certification studying, I would recommend mapping your way to a Solutions Architect Expert cert and working through that path, and then filling in things that you are actually still interested in along the way. So in addition to the Solutions Architect Expert, I also took the Power BI cert. There's many people on my team who build visualizations, and it's a helpful skill for me, even though I'm not doing the work anymore. So I've taken the Power BI exam. There's a lot of data in and out of IoT certifications, out of IoT implementations. And as a data engineer, you're going to be working with a lot of these IoT solutions. So I've also sat and taken the IoT exam. So there's many examples of ways to get yourself knowledgeable about a topic, and I find the material to be easily consumable. So the Data Engineer Associate track is going to have 2 exams, the DP 200 and the DP 201. So the skills that you'll need to be familiar with for this exam is going to be Cosmos DB, the Azure SQL Database, SQL Data Warehouse, data lake storage. For ingestion, Data Factory is going to be really big in Azure. There's Stream Analytics, Azure Databricks, and Blob Storage. And for the Azure AI Engineer Associate, you can start with the new 900 course, which is AI Fundamentals, or you can jump right into the AI 100 exam, and that will give you the Azure AI Engineer Associate. And then we have the IoT Developer Specialty. Now, it's really amazing how much data concepts are in this exam. I would have to say that this exam was probably just as hard as one of the SQL Server exams. They have coding in here, so you do need to know how to deploy the IoT hub onto an edge device, in addition to various concepts. So I would definitely get hands-on when you're studying for this exam. And I would also do a brief review of all the database. Do a quick review so that you're familiar with capabilities for all the newer databases in Azure, because there are some design / topology questions in this exam, and it's really going to be helpful for you to at least have a higher level of awareness of the different database types. So before we get into the new role level discussion, I do want to give you a brief look at the Microsoft certifications page. So many of this track information has been pulled from this dashboard. So yes, these diagrams are Microsoft diagrams, and you will see that. So this is docs.microsoft.com, and this is Microsoft Learn. They have the certification paths here. So I can go ahead and click on Data Engineer, and it will say that you can go ahead and get started with fundamentals and earn your associate certification. So you can go ahead and click here. Now, when you're looking at what do I need to study as far as topics for the exam, this is where you absolutely need to start. You need to go to the certification page here, and you need to look at the skills measured. So they'll also have, they've done like an excellent job as far as free content available on Microsoft Learn and a couple of hands-on labs. So you can look through the learning paths, but this used to be available online, but let's do the download for the online. But high level, they'll say things like implement data storage, manage and develop data processing, monitor and optimize data solutions. So when you download the outline, they'll actually give you the ranges for how important that concept is. So implementing data storage solutions is 40 to 45%. And then if you look into the details, they'll actually tell you the types of resources on Azure that these questions will be based around. So because this is an Azure exam, we don't see SQL Server in here as a focus group. We see Cosmos DB, we see Data Lake Storage Gen 2, and we see Blob Storage. So step one is absolutely go to the certification page. look at this guide, break down the different services that you'll be needing to learn about, break down the composition. And if you do not know a topic, or if you do not know what a service is, or if you do not know how to do certain things, then circle it and make that one of the things that you get started with first. And again, most of the concepts that you have been working on-prem is going to map to Azure, but you're just going to need to know the new tools. And so if the exam guide specifically calls out create pipelines and activities, then you know that you need to open up Azure Data Factory and you need to create a pipeline and create an activity and go through that process in real life so that you know enough about that process to answer high-level questions. And from experience, I don't think you need to memorize click by click, but I think you do need to know order of operations as far as what do you generally do first, as far as do you create a data source, do you add that data source, do you create a pipeline, do you add a data source to the pipeline. So definitely use this guide as your study guide. And we'll go back to my slides. So now when we look at data science teams, we can map kind of what we've been doing as data engineers, and we can fill probably any of these roles on this side of the box. And I did want to point out that there is a kind of a new emerging AI engineer, which is being added onto the data science teams. And of course, this is going to vary depending on the maturity level of your data science team. So I work in many different types of settings, and I still see data scientists who develop on their laptop. Some companies are very mature, where they will have multiple data science teams, and everything's factory style, and they work just like any other software development team would work. So there's definitely, depending on the maturity level, a difference in how these teams are structured. But keep an eye out, because there is a lot of work emerging for the AI engineer. So we see this in the certifications, where there's a very specific track for certifications that Microsoft is bringing out. So the AI fundamentals, and then the AI engineer, and then now there's an AI edge type of a track that's popping out. So, there's this capability for us to segregate some of these responsibilities. And of course, when you're working with data, we're all data stewards, and we all know about data segregation. So you want to make data as readily available to whoever needs it, but there's also specialized skills as far as people who manipulate the data. So moving forward, I definitely recommend keeping an eye out on the AI engineer role. If you are wanting to do more of that data engineering work, but not wanting to do more of the kind of like the visualization work, then this is a way to be more hands-on and program friendly. So when we're looking at kind of building that resume for that role that we want, then that's going to be another option for us as data engineers. And I I think that these are going to evolve a little bit more than just the traditional data scientist role. I think, you know, anything that we can do to enhance our how we look as data professionals is going to be fantastic, because again, 80% of what we do in any project in Azure is going to involve data ingestion, and being able to keep ACID properties of data, keep data consistent, is going to fall on us as data engineers. So I think we did have some time for Q&A, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
As I can see, there's no questions in the question and answers, and on the chat there's also no questions. And I see that people are starting leaving. Oh yes, there's one question.
Was it tough to pass the exams? And so I want to say that my best advice for any exam is to go in and fail it, because you never know. And I think that we don't know what we don't know until, you know, we try to solve that problem, or we try, you know, the first time around. So I actually have a 2-week, and this depends on, you know, your work experience and your comfort level. But if you have a level of concern about taking the exam, my best recommendation is to just go in and take it. Don't do any studying, go in and take it and get a feel for it. So you may already use a lot of the skill sets, and it's kind of like when you interview for a job and you've got all these things on your resume, and you get the job and you show up and you're all like, oh, I kind of was doing this at my last position. They just call it something else, right? So I generally study 2 weeks for an exam, take it, feel it, and then understand what concepts I don't know. And then I'll study for 2 weeks on the parts that I don't know. And so, like I said, I'm a data person. I don't do a lot of scripting anymore. I don't do networking. I have security guys, so I probably need to think about that more. But when I sit down on the exams, these are some of the things that I struggle with, because I don't use them every day. So what I'll do is I'll go in, I'll take the exam and understand that what my gaps are, my knowledge gaps, and then I'll spend focused time studying just on those topics versus starting from scratch and focusing. As far as time boxing, how long does it take you to study? I think if it's a brand new concept, give yourself 1 to 2 months. So if you've never worked with it before, totally brand new concept, you haven't even logged into Azure, you don't have an account, give yourself 1 to 2 months. So a month to just get comfortable with your environment, and then a month to do your focus study. If it's something that you've used before, I would say time box your studying. Schedule, once you've decided that you want to pass the exam, set a date on the schedule for 2 weeks from the day you make that decision. Go in and be okay with failing the exam, figure out what you did wrong, and then do your focus study, and give yourself that 2 to 4 week window to get up to speed on concepts. Because I know a lot of people who they spend way more than 2 weeks thinking about taking the exam. And I think that we all have enough skill sets where we can go in and, the difference of what we have to learn is this much. It's not insurmountable, right? So Marcin, I hope that answered your question.
Maybe I have a question. How much time do summing up have taken to you to pass the exams that you have taken?
The first exams that I took, going in the order that I took them in, it took me 2 months for my first AWS exam. And that's because I had to figure out, the entire cloud and setting up the clusters and load balancing and networking between regions. So as a DBA, if you've never touched a cloud and you want to go architect level, then 2 months and that was very focused study. I bought a Udemy course that was specific for the architect certification. And I listened to those audios while I exercised, and I did labs on the weekend. And 2 months later, I got my first AWS architect cert. Now, Power BI, I didn't have to study for Power BI. I use that all the time. I had some time on Friday. I went in and I took that exam. But that's because I do have practical experience, and I've been doing reporting for a while. So some of the concepts about visualizations is fairly easy. The SQL Server exams are pretty intense. I think you're going to need probably 4 to 6 weeks of very focused study. They're very specific questions. And I'm probably the proudest about passing those certs. And then the big data exam and the AWS architect exams, they're very, very wide exams. So you don't need as much software specific knowledge, but you need the breadth of knowledge. And the types of questions are more, when would you use this versus this? And what are the benefits of this versus this? And when would you need professional versus enterprise? So the questions are going to be a little wider. So I think start with something very broad. And so any of the fundamentals, Azure fundamentals, AI fundamentals, and it'll give you a good idea of the technologies they're focused on. And then after that, go more narrow. So after that, you can do your AI engineer, or after that, you can do your data engineer. And the biggest thing about passing the certifications is make sure you tell everybody. Update your LinkedIn page. If people in your organization are updating their signature line, update your signature line. Tell everybody you work with, hey, I've just passed this exam. And if you are not on an AI team, or you are not on an IoT project, or you are not at the architect level, but you want to be there, then this is probably one of the best ways to show people that you are interested, that you can put focused attention on the topic, and that you are willing to work to get to be there. And this is absolutely one of the biggest things that I have done for myself to show that I'm capable and I'm interested. And it's kind of like a team building exercise. So when you're in the study mode, bring others along with you. If you have other people on your team who are interested, work together with a study buddy. And my study buddy is in a different state, but he keeps me motivated as far as not waiting too long to go in for that exam, and he'll give me virtual high fives when I pass an exam, and virtual hugs when I fail an exam. So
Maybe one question.
yes.
Because if you are trying to study the Azure, and the knowledge that the books or you can read on the internet, it's maybe not enough, and sometimes you just think how to get to the point where you can have some playground. Yeah, maybe how or where you can get access to the Azure that will make you somehow practice it, or maybe some useful videos to watch.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I actually love Udemy. So if you go to Udemy, there will be some very specific videos, and so you can go maybe DP 100. So with respect to, okay, so there's studying for learning and understanding, and then there's hands-on. Okay, so
Yeah.
first you need to understand concepts. So I'll do twofold, right? So to get started with a concept, I'll find one of these certification tutorials, and Udemy is great because nothing's more than like $10-15, right? And I actually gift these courses out because I think they're so useful. But these courses will usually have some sample questions, and then they'll have the content, right? So I would suggest one of these courses for content. Now, these course materials are, at the author's discretion. So these people don't work for Microsoft. They're not going to cover 100% of the content. They're probably going to be out of date. So when you take these courses are maybe 60 to 70% of what you need to know. So that being said, don't worry about the nitty gritty. Understand the concepts, right? So listen to these while you're on your walk. Listen to these when you're driving, and then you have to do the hands-on portion. So when you do the hands-on portion, like I strongly suggest, and we had gone over this guide before. So this guide is the exam breakdown from the Microsoft website. So if the exam changes from when you purchase and view your Udemy video to when you go in and take your exam, then the Microsoft page will be updated with the new exam requirements. So always double check the exam requirements. For hands-on, I would try to do everything on this exam's requirement sheet. So if it says, maybe not like everything, but design for high availability, design a disaster recovery strategy. Okay, so this one, select the appropriate Cosmos DB API, right? Monitor Azure Databricks, monitor Stream Analytics. So all of these things that are in the guide, I would log into Azure and I would try to, well, where do I monitor Stream Analytics? How do I configure that? And I would do those steps because these are probably going to be the questions that get asked on the exam, which are order of operations questions. So most of the questions are multiple choice, but a growing majority of the questions are order of operations, where you have to sequentially put things into order to figure out your understanding of how the process works in Azure, right? Now, as far as getting credits, so I would attend most of the Microsoft events that Microsoft sponsors, they'll help with some type of Azure credit. So locally, I would keep an eye out for that. Given that a lot of things are virtual, I'm not really sure about free Azure credits, but you do, if you have a MSDN license, so if you're a software developer with an MSDN license, you do have Azure credits by default. You just have to enable that in your MSDN account. Other than that, I would sign up for a new account in Azure, and it does require, it does require your credit card, but it's really not so expensive to do things. Like, I generally don't spend more than $50 a month in Azure. And unless you set up, some really big databases. So I would try to set up a free account in Azure. You can go Google, how do I set up alerting in my Azure account to notify me when like your billing notification. You can set up where you exceed the $50 a month that you've budgeted, or you could set that threshold to $10, $15. And generally, if you spin up a database and you take it back down within a couple of days, it's only a couple of dollars a day to run. And so I would just give myself a budget and go for it, and not let that kind of impede you from trying, right? But and there's tons of lower level services that are free. So find some free stuff. And
Okay.
let me see pricing. And did you have another question?
I just want you to thank you to such great explanation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm so excited about how easy it is to get up to speed on these technologies. And thank you for having me, and thank you again to the Microsoft community for making it so easy to always be learning and continuously growing in technology. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, we also thank you for the great introductions to how to start it, and to not to be afraid.
Yeah,
Just push the limits.
yeah, just go in and fail an exam. That is my biggest advice to anyone.
And even if you fail, just put it in the resume. I failed this exam.
Yeah, I'm probably the biggest failure in my office, because I'm always failing exams. So but I eventually get to, so you have to try, right?
Yeah. So thank you. And good day, I guess.
Okay, thanks everyone. Hope you had a great day today.